Aotearoa New Zealand prides itself on being a fair and equitable country. It's a country that we love and that we work very hard to protect. Our community often fails to engage with that protection for a whole myriad of reasons. But nonetheless, we continue as a country to strive for a better, a fairer and more prosperous nation where everybody gets a fair go. We continue to strive for honest and open politics and for good government that respects all people. Now, 2007 saw a highly contentious and quite radical in some respects reform of New Zealand's electoral finance law. It was, and I've heard this being talked about tonight, not a process that was particularly well handled politically or in the debate that surrounded that reform. Now, the Green Party supported the legislation then because it made a significant step towards fixing some of the glaring holes that the 2005 election campaign had shown up. And those glaring holes were extremely serious. In my view, they showed how easily the democratic process in Aotearoa could be manipulated and distorted. Those holes showed very clearly that politics in Aotearoa was, and to some extent still is, very vulnerable to the excessive influence of wealthy players in the political realm. And I don't need to tell the story. We have books and films and a wide variety of writing that sets out that story. But I do need to restate the problems, because this legislation is designed to fix those problems and yet fails. Amongst the problems was an initially secret $1 million intervention in the campaign by the Exclusive Brethren Church campaigning for the National Party and against the Greens and Labour, without the spending falling within the National Party's election cap. Now, some argue that the electoral process worked fine then because the scam was eventually exposed. But it was not the electoral process that exposed the scam. It was the very hard work of Rod Donald and Jeanette Fitzsimons who exposed the scam. It was only because of their skill and determination to get to the truth of the matter that the Exclusive Brethren's secret was exposed. It was only Rod Donald's determination that exposed the link between the Exclusive Brethren campaign and the National Party. And the public have good cause to thank Jeanette Fitzsimons and Rod Donald for their efforts in shedding light on the ease by which our elections can be bought and sold. There were other issues that arose that showed glaring holes in our electoral law. In 2005 alone, the National Party received over $1.7 million in unidentified donations from secret trusts, and Labour received over $300,000 in anonymous donations. National's board were aware of the identity of the donors, even though their identity was hidden from the public by the use of secretive trusts. And of course we had the $120,000 illegal broadcasting overspend by the National Party. No prosecutions arose from any of those matters. Now, Aotearoa does not have a sufficiently robust regime to protect the democratic process from the threat that is posed by wealthy, secretive political players. And as the 1986 Royal Commission on the Electoral System wrote, it's not fair if some in the community can use their relative wealth to exercise disproportionate influence in determining who is to govern and what policies are to be pursued. So the Green Party will be opposing this legislation for a very important reason, and that is that there is no cap on the election spending by third parties in this bill. That is, under National's legislation, the Exclusive Brethren, or anyone else for that matter, can run an election campaign opposing a political party using an unlimited amount of money. So let's just have a look at the political environment here in election campaigns to understand why this is so important. Political parties have a spending cap of around $2 million in election campaign. Political parties have a broadcasting allocation for use on TV and radio, and they cannot use any other money but that allocation for TV and radio advertising. These caps are designed to provide a kind of level playing field so that wealthy political parties cannot completely swamp smaller or less wealthy political parties. And these rules even out, to an extent, access to airtime so that the public have even more access or have more even access, I should say, to the policies and programs of the political parties campaigning in the election. Now, that's a sound principle. Our election should be a contest of ideas and not of wallets. The Green Party supports a level playing field for political parties in an election campaign. So what happens if other non-political parties, third parties, parallel campaigners, can campaign without an upper spending limit? Well, first, it opens the door very wide to corruption in New Zealand politics. Political parties who have access to wealthy donors, corporates or individuals, can funnel those donations to a third party who can then spend as much money as they like in negative campaigning. Thousands of dollars can be spent on pamphlets and letters delivered to every household in the country. Enormous commercial billboards can be bought up in bulk to display adverts attacking a political party for months at a time. Whole armies of people can be employed to get out onto the street and campaign against a political party that happens to be out of favour with that wealthy group. Hundreds of thousands of dollars can be spent on a campaign to attack a party. And that means that political parties can funnel their funds to a third party so that that political party can avoid their spending cap. If you have money, you can corrupt the system. And what is the response of the political parties who are constrained? Well, it depends. If the wealthy interests who are campaigning against your political opponents, if that's the case, well then you might think that's fine. If not, political parties, especially the smaller ones, struggle to contest misleading or false information, struggle to get their message out to the public. Whatever side you're on, whether you benefit from that corruption or not, you simply can't argue that that's fair. Now, some would argue that people don't pay any attention to advertising. I've heard this argument before, and that's just clearly untrue. Otherwise, we would not have an advertising industry in Aotearoa with an annual turnover of $2 billion. Advertising works, that's why it's done. And in this bill, there are no limits on how much advertising a third party can buy in order to influence the outcomes of the election. Now, so there are some good things in this bill. It's not all bad. We are pleased that the parallel campaigners will have to register with the Electoral Commission, where they expect to spend more than $12,000. No New Zealander should ever be in the position again of having to hunt down a third-party identity because, like the exclusive brethren, they actively have hid their identity from the public. As I explained, though, transparency is a necessary but not sufficient to combat the opportunity for corruption that an unlimited spending cap provides. We're pleased about the retention of the donations regime that we argued for in 2007. It doesn't go as far as we like, but it's always a step in the right direction. Political parties should be transparent about their donations, and it's worth noting then today that in the donations disclosure to the Electoral Commission this week of donations over $10,000, we see that ACT got 1, the Progressives got 1, Māori Party got 1, Labour got 1, the Greens got 9, and National got none. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? I'm just not convinced about that somehow. We would like to see the threshold of donations lowered so that there is more transparency, considerably more transparency about who is donated to a political party. We're very pleased to see the offence and penalty regime has not changed. It's critical that we have a strong offence and penalty regime in our electoral law, because if the fines are too low, it simply rewards the wealthy players who would rather pay the fine because a breach of the rules enables them to achieve their preferred electoral outcome of considerable value to them, no doubt. I'll say again, sir, because I believe it, Aotearoa, New Zealand prides itself on being a fair and equitable country. It's a country we love and work hard to protect. And despite the occasional tripping up, We continue to strive for a better, fairer and more prosperous nation where everyone gets a fair go. We continue to strive for honest and open politics and good government that hears all people and protects our environment. For decisions as critical as who we elect as our most senior public decision makers, the utmost fairness, the most stringent rules, the clearest and most transparent processes are necessary, and I look forward to working for that in the Select Committee. Thank you, sir.